And that understatement would rather have suited a man they mourned with 2 minutes silence at Aintree. After a year defined by uncertainty, his steadfastness will be even more deeply missed. Rachel Younger, ITV News.
Prince Philip's old school also paid tribute today. Gordonston in Scotland was credited with helping to shape his life, gave him the love of fitness and the outdoors and his famous steely determination. Our Scotland correspondent Peter Smith is outside the school in Moray. Peter.
It was in September of 1934 that the young Prince Philip arrived, just one of 27 pupils at Gordonston at that time, and he was a 13-year-old boy who'd lived a nomadic life, and he credits this place with making him the alpha male we all came to know, specifically under the tutelage of the school's founder and principal during the Duke's time here, Kurt Hahn. He had him, the young Duke, running around the hills of Moray. There were cold baths. There was even constructing some of the paths that the pupils now work on today, very much setting the foundations, and that's why the pupils were paying their own homage to the Duke on the day of his passing. There was a lone piper, a pupil from the school, playing on the school grounds, and two of the school pupils lowered the school flag to half-mast. It was here that the young Prince Philip also perfected his sailing. That was part of the education here, and when he left, he joined the Royal Navy, and he dedicated his life to serving his country and then serving his Queen, but also he kept in touch with the school, and Kurt Hahn encouraged him in 1956 to give his name to the Duke of Edinburgh Awards scheme. And after more than 3 million people have gone through that scheme, we can see the legacy of the Duke of Edinburgh and his time here from Moray. And he also has a bursary here, making sure that the pupils are following in his footsteps in that spirit of service.
Peter Smith outside Gordonston School. Thank you. Well, the Cabinet met in Downing Street this afternoon to pay tribute, and MPs are being recalled on Monday to pay their own respects. There's also been an agreement between the Conservative and Labour parties to suspend election campaigning. Our political correspondent Libby Wiener is in Downing Street tonight. So, Libby, politics on pause then?
Yes, Mary, it's not a day for politics, but it is a day for leadership. And it's hard to think of a figure who could have united not just leaders around this country, but around the world in the way that Prince Philip has done today. Among those paying tribute, Joe Biden, the President of the United States, Vladimir Putin, the President of Russia, as well as the President of France, President Macron. Now, all of them have focused on his contribution to public life in this country, particularly his role, his wartime service in the Second World War, which did so much to shape the modern world, as well as what he gave to our children in terms of the Duke of Edinburgh Award. Now, here in the last hour or so, members of the Cabinet have been meeting virtually and paying their respects to Prince Philip. MPs will get the chance to do likewise on Monday at a special session of Parliament when Parliament is being recalled. Now, the government will update people on the pandemic, but in a more low-key way than we have got used to recently. We understand also that the Prime Minister is planning to forego that much longed-for pint in a pub garden that he said he wanted to have this Monday.
Libby Wiener in Downing Street, thank you. Well, Prince Philip led a famously active life and was keen for others to experience and enjoy the great outdoors. He created, of course, the Duke of Edinburgh's awards scheme, which is still actively followed around the world today. And his love of nature saw him become an early advocate for conservation, which he passed on to his eldest son and grandsons. Here's Rebecca Barry on the Duke's lasting legacy.
For 18-year-old Mercedes from East London, who's partially sighted, taking part in the Duke of Edinburgh's award has been life-changing and made lockdown more bearable. She's taken up running as she strives for her silver award.
I owe a lot to the Duke of Edinburgh, and I just want to say thank you for changing my life pretty much, and I'm going to help you carry on your legacy by encouraging everybody I meet to take part in Duke of Edinburgh.
Before the pandemic, teenagers could venture out on expeditions, gaining valuable skills for their life journeys. The scheme not just about camping and cooking, but building confidence.
It's warmed up, yeah.
The main purpose of the scheme is to help boys to find activities which will give them pleasure and satisfaction.
The Duke launched the scheme in 1956. Since then, it's expanded to more than 140 nations and more than 4 million young people have received awards.
People who are living in deprived areas who don't have opportunities, you have to, in a sense, provide that challenge.
In all, the Duke was patron or president of more than 800 organisations. His support helped fund cycling lessons for children, a kayaking club, even flying scholarships for teenagers.
The photographer is Prince Phillip, wildlife enthusiast of international repute.
He was also, perhaps less famously, but no less passionately, a conservationist, here on safari in Kenya in 1971.
All of these animals and birds are within measurable distance of being exterminated unless something happens.
In his determination to draw attention to man's impact on the world, he was ahead of his time. And he used his status to raise awareness, becoming president of the World Wildlife Fund.
He recognised the sheer scale of destruction that we have been wreaking on our planet, and he importantly wanted to protect it for future generations. The fact that it's up the agenda today is part of his legacy.
Sir David Attenborough first met the Duke in the 1940s when they were in the Royal Navy. Here they are together in 2019. The Duke's legacy, he says, the evolution and survival of the royal family.
Royalty in an indefinable way has modernised itself, and in that evolutionary process, the Duke of Edinburgh played a very, very important part.
And so his legacy lives on in all those still being inspired by his passions. Rebecca Barry, ITV News.
Well, Chris, the Duke famously didn't want a big fuss after his passing. What actually happens now for the next few days?
What happens now is that the body will lie in rest now at Windsor Castle. But from tomorrow, those sort of ceremonial procedures kick in, and there will be gun salutes to mark the death of Prince Philip in places like Belfast, Cardiff, London, Edinburgh, Gibraltar, even on some ships at sea. And that's quite fitting for a man who loved the Royal Navy, who served in the Royal Navy in the Second World War, and many people thought could go to the very top of the Royal Navy were it not for him having to give up that career effectively to be the consort to the Queen, and as we now know, the longest serving consort to the Queen. That is what will happen, and meanwhile the Queen will continue to sign off those funeral plans. They're likely to be next week sometime. We don't of course yet know. Difficult of course for her, but doing it at a time of a pandemic when people have been asked not to lay flowers and to make charitable contributions instead.
So puts the Duke, if you can, into historical perspective.
Well, you could focus on the support he gave the Queen, you could focus on the Duke of Edinburgh Award, but I think, you know, historians of the future will look back on the second Elizabethan era, and in the same way that now we talk about Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, I think in the future we'll look back on this reign of Elizabeth II and we will talk about Elizabeth and Philip.
Chris Shedd, Royal Editor, thank you very much indeed. And that brings to a close our special programme remembering the really extraordinary life of Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh. He passed away peacefully, we're told, this morning at Windsor Castle, just a few months short of his 100th birthday. The Queen described her deep sorrow at the loss of her beloved husband of more than 70 years. They met and they fell in love before many of us were even born. At the time, the young prince was seen as a rather unlikely match for the future Queen. But their love endured, and he went on to become Britain's
tribute Joe Biden, the President of the United
States. Birthday. The Queen described her deep sorrow at the loss of her beloved husband of more than 70 years. They met and they fell in love before many of us were even born. At the time, the young prince was seen as a rather unlikely match for the future Queen. But their love endured, and he went on to become Britain's longest-serving royal consort. He created his very own role, and he devoted himself to Queen and country. She She called him, as we've heard, her strength and stay. And today the nation joined the Queen in remembering Prince Philip's remarkable life and his selfless sacrifice and service. From all of us here, good evening.